everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today in this webinar of results and learn lessons about the GE7 projects of electromobility. We will focus on digitalization in electric mobility. This event is organized by the practical community of SoMoS LAC, the Access Project of Digitalization of Urban Mobility, and the Regional Platform of Support and Investment for Electromobility Programs in Latin America and the Caribbean. On behalf of the team, we welcome you, all of you. I want to remind you that this webinar has simultaneous interpreting to English and Portuguese. Because of this, I invite Daniela for her to explain to us how to activate interpreting. Hello, everybody. Presentations today will be in Spanish. Questions will be in English, Spanish, or Portuguese. If you require simultaneous interpreting in Spanish, you may go to the lower bar and choose Spanish. If that does not work, you can go to the 3 points on the lower bar and the option More and choose Interpreting, then choose Listen in Spanish. Thank you so much, Daniela. Thank you for the very clear instructions. I take this chance to mention to our audience that we invite you to change your name in the Zoom platform, preferably name, surname, and the organization. And plus, it's very important to mention that this webinar is being recorded. Well, we will begin now with the welcome opening words. We will invite Marcela Castillo, Subdirector of the CMS. Welcome, Marcela. Hello, Juan Diego. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see you all today. Just like Juan Diego mentioned, I want to welcome you to this webinar, fruit of the collaboration of all the initiatives that were already mentioned by Juan Diego and that are related to electromobility in our region. We are SoMoS LAC, Access, and the Regional Platform of Support and Investment to Electromobility. From this platform in the last organization is led by Penuma and the CMS. We are working with a very practical area, which is helping every country in Latin America and the Caribbean for their projects of electromobility to be replicated in other cities or other countries and then escalate. We do this mainly providing technical support, analyzing any information, and developing roadmaps that are real and adequate for every of the cities and the countries of the Latin America and the Caribbean. This is not an isolated personnel. We are part of a global program with platforms in other places of the world, which are financed by other strategical partners, which are guests of the initiative and the European Union as well. Our mission here is very clear, is to consolidate this community of practice for knowledge of those projects that have resulted in several countries and for investment to flow in the entire Latin American and the Caribbean region. As the CMS, we are really happy, which is why we're going to check this out today, what's being shared on the webinar. And furthermore, I do not want to prolong this speech too much. So, Juan Diego, please welcome the other teams and speakers of the webinar. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful webinar. Thank you, Marcela. And now I would like to invite Alejandro Ceballos, Technical Assessment of the Europe Weather Program of the GIZ. Alejandro, please. Thank you, Juan Diego, and welcome everyone to this webinar. We from SoMoS LAC, which is a practice community of electromobility and sustainable mobility for the Latin America and the Caribbean countries. We're celebrating this alliance with Access and with the regional platform of electromobility for the development of this webinar that we're hosting today. Mainly because also from our practical community, what we are looking for is to establish alliances and synergies that may enable the deployment and the visibility of knowledge and projects that we are developing right now surrounding the topics of sustainable mobility in this region. From SoMoS LAC, we have 5 topical groups, and this activity specifically, we are framing it in the thematical group of digitalization in transport. So to not go too far, I would like to thank you again for the invitation and be very welcome, all of you, to this session today. Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you so much. Well, now I'm going to make a few comments about the agenda of today's webinar. Moving on, we are going to have 3 presentations about the GEF7 projects in Chile, Costa Rica, and Ecuador. They're going to talk about the results and the experience that they had. Above all, trying to check public policy and how that behaves. After the presentation, we will open the discussion panel where we will have the ministry responsible for developing these pilot projects. And after the panel, we will have the closing statements, and with that, we will end this webinar. Therefore, without further ado, we will start the first presentation today on this webinar. I would like to welcome Arturo Steinvorth, the coordinator of the Crusa Foundation project in the GEF7 project in Costa Rica. Welcome, Arturo. Thank you, Juan Diego. Here I am sharing my screen so that you can see the presentation in full screen mode, hopefully. Okay, ready. Yeah, we can see it, Arturo. Thank you. Perfect. Well, very nice to meet you. Thank you for the invitation, for being able to share this experience in terms of this project that is already finished in Costa Rica. This project, well, was named Accelerating the Transition Towards Electric Public Transport in the Greater Metropolitan Area of the country, or the GAM. So I am going to walk you through the results mainly with the learned lessons. And as I was saying, this project had a very large implementation between 2021 and 2025. It ended in June in 2025, and the main objective was to facilitate the enabling conditions for a large-scale uptake of electric vehicles in transportation in Costa Rica. This project had both components with buses and taxi vehicles. Between the organizers, the management of the project was under Crusa Foundation, who is representing us today, the UN Environment Program, the Ministry of Environment and Energy, and between the steering and technical committees, we had the Ministry of Public Work and Transport, the Council of Public Transportation, or the CTP, the ISE group as well, the Regulation Authority of Public Services, the INAMU, and the UCR, and also the regional support from the GEF7 and from the CMS through this support network and investment through this platform of support and investment for Latin America and the Caribbean. In the first component, all of these projects are structured in the same way. It's related to institutional area or the institutionalization of low carbon electric mobility. And in our case, it was mainly focused in the development of capacity building materials in different areas of the ecosystem, say the financial sector or maybe the institutional sector. And from these capacity building materials and trainings, we were creating audiovisual material to communicate the results of the project. We created this infographics, the first of all related to the pilot project and the pilot demonstration surrounding electric taxis in the international airport Juan Santa Maria. And also the idea was to communicate how it works and what type of critical information is needed to understand the electric charging of a vehicle. We also have how you can define in a more educated way the purchase of an electric vehicle for a service of public transport, which was the main focus for this project. What are the financial conditions that you need to have to purchase one? And how do you incorporate the gender component throughout the project? And finally, what type of incentives does the country have for this type of purchase as well? And now we also created more videos and infographics. This is a bit more on the visual side. And also in the part of videos, we created videos with the Learning Institute of... We created more videos that tell us how electric vehicles work in terms of how do they work in terms of upkeep and maintenance, and also with a local company called Fortec that works with battery management, tells us what happens with those batteries after they reach the end of their useful life and what to do with them. Another point of this first component, which we use to support the Environment and Energy Ministry, was the automation of statistics related to electric vehicles in the country. Not because in the past it had to be done manually, focus in one specific person who was the one who had the experience to do this type of information recollection. And with this new tool, they train the Ministry of Environment and Energy to be able to use it with several people, and they have a rendition monthly of what type of vehicles are getting into the country and to carry that type of information. These data that you see here are from 2025. Carolina later on can comment on how we are doing in this area. Now, what was the main results that we have from the first component? The capacity building activities that have over 600 people participating, over 70 organizations participated as well. We had people from government agencies, from local governments, from the banking sector, the National Assembly, and the private sector. And there was a knowledge exchange, not only on a national level, but also in activities hosted related with projects from Ecuador, Peru, a Caribbean forum of electromobility in Antigua and Barbuda, some projects in Grenada, Dominica, St. Lucia, and even Chile, who's hosting this time. And it's a more regional level event. The second component had more relation to bringing down myths related to electric vehicles. In this case, the project was focused in the international airport Juan Santa Maria with e-taxis that provide a very specific service for that area of operation in Costa Rica. And they started operating 6 e-taxis as part of the project. There was an installation of 6 charging points of 7 kilowatts at the time. And as we're going to see later on in Learn Lessons, there we had to install at the end of the project, at the end of the pilot project, I mean, we install a fast charging point of 120 kilowatts with 2 connectors for it to be used by the e-taxis at the airport. Now, from the learning experience, we installed 3 charging points in touristic communities. And these 3 chargers were fast, low power, as we call them here, which would be of 28 kilowatts. During the year of operation, the taxis travel over 600,000 kilometers, all of them over 100,000 kilometers each. There was no much loss in the battery capacity. The only vehicle that had a loss during that year went from 100% to a 98%. So we see that degradation truly for the amount of kilometers traveled was relatively minimum. There was an energy cost between 28 to 44 colones in the case of Costa Rica, which would be from 69 cents for electric vehicles, while for the vehicles of internal combustion engines or ICEVs, they were between 11 and 15 cents of a dollar. So that's a huge difference, that with the amount of kilometers that you travel in this area in energy cost, there's a huge difference already. Now, energy efficiency of electric vehicles was of 60 kilometers per liter of gas equivalent, while for the ICEVs, it was around 12 kilometers per liter. So we see that, again, it's 5 times more efficient to use an electric vehicle in terms of energy efficiency than the one that is an ICEV. They were training at least 42 taxi drivers and companies. Not only the people from the companies needs to learn to understand the vehicle, but also the company. And over 10,000 taxi users use this service during the time of the project, and over 3,500 of these people did with electric taxis. In the end, on an environmental level, we avoided 74.5 tons of CO2 equivalent. These are the different reports that we publish of this compound 2. First has to do a lot with design of the pilot plan. The second with the results themselves. There was a report focused on the management of data, or the acquiring of data from the taxi driver section, which is not a sector that reports any type of information to authorities, but it's actually a sector that operates very freely and without really talking to authorities in general. So there's this third report, and it was made based on the last report, which was an analysis of good practices surrounding the acquisition and management of electric cars. The third component, that has to do with upscaling, had 2 parts. One focused, well, actually 3 parts. One focused in energy efficiency and how we can, within the legislation and national norm, to incorporate criteria or measures that may push energy efficiency within the vehicle sector. So we created these 2 reports, one of good practices, the other about the proposal itself for Costa Rica. We created these other 3 reports related to that, with the financial aspect of the taxi area in airports. So there was a diagnosis of the profile of people who were taxi drivers and their access to support, financial support. There was a report related to total costs of electric taxis and ICEVs taxis for the pilot plan. And finally, we designed an instrument, a financial instrument, to be able to facilitate the access to financial support and upscaling of electric taxis in the country. And of course, with a focus in the area that we were focusing on. Also, we developed a roadmap for the electric bus fleets. That was around 2022, 2023. There was analysis done of the conditions at the time of the bus fleets, baseline of where that sector was at the time. And finally, we published as well a roadmap for bus electrification in Costa Rica. The same process happened for taxis, not only in the international airport, but also the taxis in the GAM of Costa Rica, where we develop a baseline inform report about the fleets, what good practices were out there to electrify and provide incentives for taxi drivers on a national level, and finally to end in this roadmap of electrification of services in the taxi sector. And finally, the component 4 that had to do with managing long-term sustainability and battery management. Again, there was a publication of reports of good practices on a global and national level, and there was an idea to provide good practices in policies and norms. Now, also, as I mentioned, the gender action plan was happening throughout the implementation of the project. Regarding the design of the project, we included the participation of women that were part of the taxi services. We selected 2 women for the acquisition of electric taxis during the project. 2 of these women concessionaires were also part of the mirror monitoring process, which was done with ICEVs. 4 women drivers were part of the pilot project, who participated of the pilot project, yes, and also all the information that was generated from the pilots and the training and else was disaggregated by sex. So we can see there are critical aspects that we notice from the project that we must include, and we must visibilize that the conditions of financing for women were not the same than for men. There's a lot of gender gaps that may be seen as opportunities to create more inclusive systems. And again, within the roadmaps that we have created for taxis and buses, we already had gender measures that may want to accelerate the inclusion of women within electromobility. So in the end, to finish, in terms of infrastructure, charging infrastructure was a painful point for this project, because while we did have a wide reach, it wasn't really trustworthy in terms that the fleet of electric cars and buses has grown so much to such a point that it did not guarantee people or taxi drivers that they couldn't use directly this charger. So this created a dependency or a need to have a specific infrastructure and exclusive for this sector. So that's what I mentioned before. We had to install a fast charger in the area of the parking lot of taxis in the airport. We saw that the costs, the operational costs of these vehicles and the efficiency in their use was going to depend highly on the habits of driving and charging of the taxi drivers, and how the concessionaires would provide them with information. And we did notice that through the incentives that we provided as part of the project, it created an acceleration on this purchase of the taxis that we did for the pilot project. And we need to show the benefits on an economic level, and in a certain way on a Costa Rican level, there is an issue with the environmental topic, which is by visualizing these 2 ideas, we can make it happen. This electromobility idea that is sustainable, public transportation might be faster, and maintenance is critical for taxis to operate continuously. And this is due to the fact that, as you see, the ICEVs and their practices that they had, they would have several days out of service because of maintenance. So being able to use the vehicle, being able to use it and take advantage of it to create more income is created through preventive maintenance. And we must create as well alliances with the tourism sector for this specific type of taxis, because they might increase demand significantly. And in general, the taxi service at the airport is a very exclusive service of the airport. They can only be used by the airport. So being able to connect it with the tourism area and increasing demand, it would make electrification far more simple in these services. Plus, Costa Rica, well, we have created sensibilization with the citizens with electric vehicles. Of course, this sector requires more partnership, more attention, more awareness, and this can help us in the future to strengthen acceptance for electric vehicles in the public transport sector. We must create new laws that are clear and concise surrounding charging infrastructure so we can create more trust towards this type of infrastructure, as I mentioned before. There were experiences that were not really positive for some of the taxi drivers, and that is an area that shows us our bigger reality on a national level. There are really affirmative action that may be implemented to accelerate the inclusion of women in a very non-traditional field, such as electric mobility and in general the transport area. It is also critical to include the aspects of gender equity during all steps of the project, as we were mentioning before, from its design until the evaluation of the project, to really ensure the effectiveness and the expected results of the project. And obviously, none of this would be possible without an efficient coordination between ministries, between any institution or organization that provide technical information, any financial entities, and of course, other stakeholders that may be part of the electromobility system that are critical to reduce the gaps in the access to opportunities of women in the transport sector. That's a little bit of what we learned. I hope we stayed in time. This is basically what's happening in the country, and I will be providing you with more opportunities to share this information and to answer the questions in the chat regarding what you had indicated in the beginning. So back to Juan Diego. Thank you for the presentation. Your work was really interesting with the taxis and the information that you were developing. So thank you so much for your presentation. Before we go to the following presentation, I want to welcome Mr. Diego Jaramillo, Subsecretary of Land Transport in Ecuador, who kindly joined us today to the webinar. Thank you for joining. Now, moving forward with our agenda, I would like to invite Jennifer Salazar, project lead of the SE agency, leading at this time. She will talk to us about it, the GEF7 Chile project. Go on, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Juan Diego, and I'm going to ask for permission in order to share my screen. If you are going to be able to do that for me, thank you. Okay, here we go. Please confirm if everything is working correctly, if you can see my screen. I can only see it in blank. Yes, now I can see it. Everything is working correctly. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And thank you very much for the SMS, for the invitation in order to share the results of the program GEF7 in the Chilean community that it has as a goal is going to accelerate the electromobilities on regions. Starting with this presentation, I would love to mention everybody what it is, the role of this agency of energy sustainability. It is like the one that is going to create the connection between the industry, and it's going to implement the public policies on the matter of energy, like it's going to create the initiatives in the public and private that is going to promote the energetic motions, and especially in transport, because transport is one of the things that we're working right now on the project of electromobility. We have talked a lot about what Chile has gone forward on the subject of electromobility, converted in the second country after China to having the biggest amount of electric vehicles and the biggest amount of electrical vehicles concentrated in one region. And we're going to see that is a reality that we have in our country, taking into account that is a different point of charge that we have in Chile. 75% of this are in the capital and metropolitan region. And I think it is going to increase the importance of send the electromobility to the different regions. And that it was the focus of our program with the GEF7 of the other points that Arturo said. And we specified in here on public structure, circular economy, territorial pilots, and studies that is going in order to decentralize the electromobility. And this project is going to create through visions that are quite different, especially from the subject of geomorphology, and of course to abilities and the connections that we're going to be able to have in order to have points of electromobility. And we do it in the regions of Antofagasta, Maules, and Los Lagos in order to push that technology and to bring them to those regions. The project GEF7 is going to create a facilitator of this transition. And what we have done is that we did two projects of co-finance, public and private, and this project have two focus. In the name are different, quite different from the one that were pilot. The biggest it was the more public transport. That is what's looking in order to have like a lower amount of passengers, and I want to call it less like taxis, and it's like smaller amount of public transportation that have a very fixed structure actually in our country. And we have actually the finance of 50% of at least of the electrical mobility car, and also our recharges that is going to be given for free, that is going to incorporate it during the help of the state. And this is one of the numbers that we have seen of the program in regions. For example, in Antofagasta we have two given away in region of Maule 14, and then in the other region is 35 delivers of cars. And we see that is what was the biggest difference of the change in their car. And then we have the other program that it is more charging, that is going to be faster chargers. And that was a co-finances from the CapEx that is going to be considered on the 30% around of co-finance of the total cost of the charger. And it's going to be installed also 150 kilowatts of power in the region of Maule and Los Lagos. And in that sense, it's going to give the opportunity to the inhabitants of the regions, not only the given a car, electrical car, but also what is going to be the public charge of it. And also we create a cooperation of public and private sectors through different studies that have contributed and are continued contributing into public policies. The first one is going to be the impact in the electromobility and the public system that we're going to see. In order to adapt that technology in the system, we are in need to have a planning and laws in order to make that the community is going to enter not only as a consumer of energy, but also as an injector of energy that is going to create more energy into the world. This is something that we're going to be able to incorporate the electromobility in a massive way, not only in a small way. And then we also have different tools of like making decision making, and we see the different tools that they have the different sectors in order to create, for example, finance on a different tax or a different like kind of payment that they were like adding this technology and in a very early stage. And then by the end we have the battery out of use as a derivative from electromobility. And then I wanted to stop on that because this study actually contributed to the law 20,920 that even tomorrow is going to be in a public consultation that is going to create a sum of projects and how many batteries we need in order by sector of electromobility vehicles that are public. And that is a segment that is not only minimum, but it's also massive too. On top of that, something that we have already talked about in our country, and I think Arturo has already explained it very well, is that we have to come with human capital that is going to be specialized. And this is not only have to be taken as the use of electrical vehicle, but also as an ecosystem that is going to be habilitated around the electrical vehicle. We always talk that we do have the infrastructure of public charging, and we do having like the domestic, the houses that are with chargers too, but also we need to have like human capitals on different territories. And through the GEF7, we are able to create it and train more than 100 people, especially in the first emergency, especially like first responders, firemen, emergency services of the country, and also train electrical installers. On top of that, and mechanics formed. On top of that, we also create a program of mechanic that is going to be based on the initiation and introduction to electromobility for them to have like knowledge of these electrical vehicles. In that, it's going to contribute, it's going to create an equal number of the gender equality. That is one of our programs that is most important because we're trying to reduce this gap and have it like less than 40% of participation in the whole program, and the different initiatives that we have on the training, especially in discussion of content, and all the initiatives that we have done in order to contribute these results. So in that sense, we can't to account with this human capital that was key in order to show what happened next to it, because you were able to see how the regions were able to change in different numbers, especially with the conditions that they had at the beginning. For example, inside of the project More Public Transport, we see how was the previous condition that these three regions had at the moment, and then we're going to be able to have a change from insufficient to another state that it was like adopting the technology. And we were able to see of these 3 points that are like the providers of vehicles, technical capacity, and the public infrastructure. And we're going to be able to see what was relevance of each one of these items in order to create indicators that are going to allow us to see what is the impact of the GEF7 in regions. But this has a lot of challenges. It was not only the implementation and the training of the pilots to see the training of everybody, but also we have to give away the studies and the contribution of public policies, but also all the challenges that we had to have during the stage of and the creation and design of the project, because this is only considered like other type of delivery of public health, and that it has to be adequated into the way that the country does it. During the implementation stage, we were able to see some challenges. For example, the providers of electrical vehicles in these regions, where we were going to be able to have on these regions. And we realized that we didn't have like providers in certain regions, but also in some regions we had providers, but the cars didn't arrive because they didn't have like the technical training people that are going to be able to have the post-sale service. And that is something that we had to resolve with our team, that we didn't take into account in order to implement, in order to have like a post-sale service that more people is going to be able to join in electromobility, and is going to have that push in order to be better. And then we have the infrastructure of housing charging, that we saw that is an area from, like, for example, like small companies, that it has to be more accompanied, and then they have to have more support, because they're going to help us in order to have this process of implementation passing from 30 days in one connection of one charger in one house to 100 days. And that has affected a lot, because we're not going to be able to fulfill the results of the different discover, but they didn't realize, and they didn't have the knowledge about how is the service of the electrical service in order to put the charges in the houses. So in that sense, the role of the agency of energy sustainability to give information is going to put in importance that these regional systems also require a bigger support in order to implement this technology. In that sense, to create more public information in order to break the myth about technology. For example, what happens if the car it is charging and it is raining, for example. We have all this doubt of people, and in this, especially in this area, that is going to be on the movement of smaller public vehicles of transport. And we had like actually tester for the vehicles in different regions, and in that sense they're going to be able to try to apply to the program, and they're going to be able to implement it with a bigger amount of public vehicles in those regions. And also we were able to see one of the main challenges that we had as a program that is going to be linked to the association and training. And especially we have a lot of institutions that is very marked in the system in order to arrive to the sector in our country based on the hierarchy that it has all the institutions in many and many situations was very difficult because we couldn't find people that are going to be beneficiary of those initiatives, even though it's something very relevant in order to avoid more problems into the system. And for last, something that is marked in red, the importance of do a follow-up of these vehicles in order to have numbers that are going to be actual validated and is going to contribute in order to create more projects of electromobility. For example, we were not able to create like monitoring of the post sale or the post delivery of these vehicles because we didn't have enough charges publicly in order to do a correct follow-up of them. Or for example, what is going to be the delivery of public charges in order to see what is the charge, the level of charge and the level of what's are going to be able for these electrical vehicles. For last, we have like the learning lessons that we have in this program, and I'm going to put like a couple of the most important ones, and you see here in the presentation, and then the half of the presentation I show you that the conditions of the regions, it was insufficient for each one of them for electromobility, based off of that indicator to a medium indicator through the intervention of GEF7 and regions. Due to, we realized that this structure of public charger in the houses was the biggest factor in order to implement the electromobility in a massive way. And because everybody had a question that where are going to charge my vehicle, and also to define what is the profile of charging of each one of the person that are going to be able to acquire electrical vehicle. And for example, in these cases of like taxis on small transport vehicles that are public, the amount of the chargers that we have was very key in order to give away like all the cars in order to have this amount of operations and the type of operations of the vehicles. And in that sense, it's all going to allow us to pass from one pilot to actual mechanisms that are going to give results to the people that are going to use it. For example, that we found like the knowledge of public charging, and now we're going to be able, in order to have this project of more fast charging in the second stage, and then going to start going to co-finance public chargers in order to create like a also bigger technical capacity. And that is something very relevant in order to give this information not only to the giveaways of the vehicle, but also to the not only to the public sector, but also into the private sector, and how we answer to emergencies. For example, if they had any accident in the electrical vehicle, we also work in that matter too. And for last, in between, it is very key in order to see the impact on an electrical network and the ways that this industry is going to have, because as we commented before, we do have an impact that the electrical network is going to have if we have like 5 or 10 vehicles that are going to be charging in one street, for example. And we need to know what is we're going to do on the waste, for example, on the lithium batteries, especially that we're working right now through public policies. And the preparations of the regional preparations that I've talked before is very important in order to create these conversations of the 3 different providers, the main providers, not only in the private and the private sector and public sectors and the electrical vehicle set itself, and the capacity of the vehicles and the GEF7, and to create the capacity that we need in the country, we need to have the cooperation of the regional governments in order to have like a better solution to this program and to have better results of the program. And right now you do have some initiatives of the Ministry of Transport, for example, renew your taxi, renew your public transport vehicle. And that is, in this idea, there's not going to be only a pilot, but it's going to create continuity to the public policies and the strategy of electromobility that we have right here. So here we're going to see the impact that the program had, the GEF7 and the 3 regions. For example, the first thing is in the governance and territorial project governance, and it was in the first states that we're going to see 3 different ministries. It's not only like energy, transport, and environment, and a different center of the ministers that are going to help us in order to work with the different areas of the private areas. And on top of that, 15 companies that is going to be co-finance vehicle companies, and for less, more than 100 people trained with different educational institutions that is going to have to do with emergencies of chargers and also the installation of private chargers. And that is the result of the GEF7. And right now I'm going to leave you a QR code where you can check all the studies and all the results that we have already on our webpage. And on top of that, also the things that we learned from the project more fast charging, and we're going to see what is the repercussion of the project and also the costs that were associated to those public chargers in our country. And for example, in the more public transport, we're going to be able to see what is the condition of each one of the regions, how it's going to impact the program of GEF7, and what are the main recommendations in order to give sustainability to this type of project that is going to change the public system. And on that sense, we're in this more fast charging, we have to see also the importance of the public policies and also to the distribution of the cars that are going to create more cars into the network, and then information of electromobility, and then what happened with the batteries of lithium battery. I hope that I didn't pass my time, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for that presentation. And I keep with that with the biggest challenge that it was in order to implement this project in this long country that is Chile, and of course the difficulty that, for example, in order to find providers of monitors of these vehicles and to do these follow-ups. Thank you very much. No, thank you. Now we're going to pass what is the last presentation of our first block. I invite Alexandra Suasnavas, and is going to be the head of the project of UEMI, and is going to be the head of project in the electric public transport in Ecuador. Thank you very much, Juan Diego. We're going to be able to see it in presentation mode very well. Thank you very much. For me, it's a pleasure to be here today, and especially continue to promote these spaces of exchange of experiences. And I think it is very valuable, especially in this project of Movilisa, of to move around, that we're going to see for the country and for Ecuador actually has a very big spaces of feedback, not only with the colleagues of Costa Rica, but also Chile. And we appreciate a lot that collaboration of you all. Our project is very long, but it's called Support in the Transition to Low Carbon Electromobility in Ecuador. I represent the initiative of mobility, of urban electric mobility, and it is a non-governmental organization that is based in Germany, and it is going to focus in development of project in the urban area and to have like inclusive mobility. The project Immobile, it has like a project of governance that we have in Chile, and the different entities are very important, but they are like environment and energy. And we have also the Ministry of Transport. And we also work with the School of Polytechnic, National Polytechnic, and the SMEs in Chile. In the same sense, we have this project that is going to be part of 4 main components with our colleagues, of course, that we spoke today. But today I'm going to focus on the 2 first one, because right now we continue to execute the project, and we're going to continue to implement it into the end of the year. And of course, but only then we're going to be able to give you our results. So in the component of internalizations, one of the key parts are the extraining of the capacity. We're going to be able to create like biggest and a lot of process of training in the country, and we have done it hand in hand with the National Polytechnic School, and there is a school that is going to focus on engineering in the country. And all these like knowledge that they have on this school has been a key element in order to design the different process of training that has been very successful. And for only just to mention a couple, we have worked already with how we're going to train them for the response of emergencies, the first response to emergencies, and we have had some results that have been like very new to us. We have had a lot of training of firemen, where we have had like a very good welcome, and we were going to be able to arrive to 221 fireman departments that we have in the country. And I think that's very important in order to highlight that we have been able to promote the participation of women and the gender focus training in the training processes. But also we have had some challenges on this aspect because, for example, these people that is going to give like the answer to first emergencies and first responses of issues of security, it is an area that is highly masculine. But we have promoted in order to adjust, for example, a schedule, maybe to see availabilities of the participant in order for them to be part of these processes in order to continue to have more women in training. Here, only to share you a couple of pictures of what we have had in all these processes. In our case, we have a training that with the electrical engineers that it has like a theoretical and practical like part, and how you see in the higher left area. And then we have also a 3-day training process that is going to be subject with the structure of rechargings, how is going to be disposed of the battery, the type of like fuels that we're going to use. And especially the people from SMS were able to visit us in Ecuador, and it was in a space that is very interesting for us. And we have continued to explore with the National Polytechnical School how we are going to create a better institution of these spaces and to create a better like training process after we finalized the project. And on the month of March of this year, we were able to do a training course of trainers that is going to be available in the webpage of the Urban Living Life Center, and that everybody that is interested on that can go or can reuse that training course. And we just put that into your information and your knowledge. And now passing to the second component that is had to do with the electrical mobility pilots, that in our case is going to be more of a logistic point of view of how it's going to be the last mile of it. And the last component of this pilot is going to be the implementation of it and the gathering of all the data. And in that sense, we think that is like super important. And for us, the pilot of electrical mobility has been created through a map of distribution and how we're going to deliver of all the products that we have named cross-docking, and we have promoted a cross-docking platform in a center of distribution of electrical cars, especially that the pilot is going to take into account that is going to be the circle center of Quito and the capital of the country. And this center historical has been considered of low emission area, being we have to do that during this process of the goals of the climate change based by the UN. And what we want to do is how is we're going to look and we're going to answer to that lower emission that we need to have in part of our main goals for that. And how we're going to do this moving of, for example, of all the products is going to reduce the inventory, and how we're going to do it with the cost of transport, and how we're going to accelerate the amount of product that we're going to move around. And in that sense, we're going to look for small vehicles that are going to be electrical, and it's going to minimize the big and the trucks on that area, especially in the sensitive area that it is the center of the city. And on that, in that sense, we see the analysis of like how we're going to put these cross-docking platforms. And we see, for example, parking lots that not very used in the sector. And in that sense, we decided to find the parking spot of the water museum Yaku that we saw that are in the border, that are connected with the main streets of this historical center, and in order to enter that center, and we're able to readapt different like warehouses so they can participate in our project. And now you can see the process of construction of this platform, and on that testing area with the different electrical vehicles that are going to be part and that have been put into disposal of different companies for their use. And here you're going to be able to see vehicles that we are promoting during this pilot. And we have been working with a rent scheme system. And in that sense, the model that you have seen, that it is the helmet, that it is on the right, number 3, you are going to see that is very used on a local level. And we have tried, because it is built in the country. And in the same sense, it's the vehicle that is called HITMA. It has been assembled in the country for one of the companies, and in order to erase these barriers of acknowledgement of how we're going to use electrical vehicles in the country. And also we work with this tricycle that is going to be like kind of a tuk-tuk, that is going to create a solution plus. And these vehicles were tested in a couple of cities in the country, so we include them too in our pilot. And the process of charging and the charging infrastructure that we have right now, our system that we have, it has 4 chargers of 7 kilowatts, and they are on the disposal of the different companies that are participating into the pilot. In the same sense, we put an availability of chargers for traveling, and it is included inside of the vehicle. And we do have some chargers of like semi-fast charging that are available in the city, and those are like public charging, but we don't have like many spaces of charging still. But it is another option that the companies has in case of an emergency. And you can going to see the providers of vehicle have put also, for example, a charger that it is like a semi-fast charger. It is a distributor of these cars. And we also have like a fast charging place from the Grupo Mavesa, and it is one of the companies that is actually providing and assembling the vehicles in the country. And we have seen that in the process of charging, and it has been like accommodated to our times.
I also
In
want to
order
highlight the
to
relevance
mark
of the
the
monitoring of the
monitoring of the
pilot.
project of the
And the pilot wants to provide
pilot,
evidence
the pilot
for
is going to
decision
use,
making, both
and it's
for
going to
public
see
entities and as well for private entities that are taking part in these new schemes of goods distribution, and as well as thinking or planning a possible electrification of their fleets. Therefore, here you can see some details of the indicators that we have been collecting from the pilot. Some of them are operational. We also have environmental indicators. We also have the pilot and the vehicles have telemetric indicators that provide information in real time. We have things like GPS, speed, battery charging, the state of the vehicle, etc. And we also complemented it with some reports, information metrics, to be able to have information that is added. Also, some perception indicators. We are very interested to understand firsthand how the companies are experimenting with this change in the use of technologies of the cross-docking platforms, evaluating this adaptation to change, and how they experience charging and autonomy of vehicles. The topic of economic impact, which is also very important, and a possible organizational change and acknowledgement, because they have the important possibilities of contributing to reduce of carbon footprint. Now, this is some of the data that we have generated at the time. For example, the travel distance of the participating companies, just to mention one example, and to not waste too much time. Then we see the maps that evidence the travel distances, and also the routes done by the companies. At the same time, we have promoted for the pilots to have a gender focus. We provided a favorable amount of points that included women drivers in the phase of the pilot project. when they were calling for drivers with the means to promote women to participate in the logistics sector and also in sustainable mobility. And here are some of the results. Since we are still executing the pilot project, we are going to do it until July, give or take a few weeks. So we still have some results to process, but in here I can share with you the first month of piloting. We have a total emissions avoided of 9,516 kilograms of CO2 equivalent, approximately. And the perceptions so far have been quite positive. We can highlight from the companies as well that is easy to continue with the use of technology. It is also evidence during the project that there's a need to have better charging infrastructure available to be able to get involved better to electric mobility. We also have some pictures of what the process has been like with some of the companies, how they have been involved in this pilot project, and well, some pictures from the implementation of goods loading, for example, in this cross-docking platform that you can see, and the areas of fast charging from Mavisa Group. So to finish, I want to share some learned lessons in terms of training processes and their promotion. I think we believe that they have been very valuable. They have created foundations for this, and it's fundamental to keep promoting them. While we have attempted to reach several sectors, for instance, mechanical areas, maybe first response, emergency sector, the public sector, but there's no doubt we still need to move further because there still exists a huge gap in knowledge, in most of all in different entities of the public sector. We have talked about as well with colleagues that are part of the interinstitutional panel of electromobility, and we have to promote these training spaces progressively within the country. Another key concept that we want to highlight as a learned lesson is that for this project, it has been very favorable to establish alliances with different actors. We want to highlight the work that we have done with the National Polytechnic School, the CMS in Chile, and also on a local level, we have worked a lot, for instance, with entities such as the Industry and Production Chamber or Council. We have helped to promote the benefits of being part of this type of pilot projects, and that in a way has helped that more companies can join this pilot project. So there's also a lot of resistance from several companies. In many cases, it's because they don't really understand, and we're trying to reach these areas. That's key. And of course, entities such as Mavisa, the Municipality of Quito, and international cooperation like GIZ. We have also articulated alliances in such a way that we can create more impact with our initiatives to complement action and to avoid the duplicity of effort. That has been really important. I'd like to highlight as well, within the many challenges, we have seen several institutional changes that does affect, and recently there's been several changes in the National Transit Agency, and there are difficulties with the enrollment process of the vehicles, and that does affect the execution of the project. And we have also seen and noticed that we need to strengthen several processes to become standardized, especially when it comes to charging infrastructure, for instance. And on the same line, in our country, we still have a structural deficit of public charging infrastructure. Nowadays, we do have charging stations that are private and that are limited for certain brands, for exclusive use of certain brands. And that does represent disincentive for all the several companies that may or may not want to access them freely for those charging stations. So that would be it. Mostly, those would be the main learned lessons. I really hope as well to not have used up too much time, and I thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Alexandra. Really interesting, this presentation, and it's a project that we're still executing, so we are paying attention to the final result of this very interesting pilot project. So thank you, Alexandra. Well, we're going to continue to the next part of this webinar, while I invite Carolina, Armando, Diego for them to open their cameras to show us your cameras. While they turn on their cameras, let me tell you that the idea of this panel of conversation is to discuss and, in a way, digest the presentations done previously and try to see what kind of impact they had in the development of public policies. I can see Carolina, maybe Armando, I can see him too, Diego. Diego, can you hear us? So in the meantime, while he resolves this technical issue with the camera, we are going to begin this part of the panel. So the first part is how these projects, these pilot projects, create technical evidence to start developing the public policies in our region. For that, let me invite people that worked on the ministry side supporting these projects. We have Carolina Flores from the Energy Direction for the Energy Ministry of Costa Rica, Armando Perez, technical expert of the efficient transport area from the Ministry of Energy in Chile, and Diego Jaramillo, subsecretary of urban transport in the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport in Ecuador. Welcome, all of you. I don't really know if Diego can hear us yet. Armando, Carolina, can you guys hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you too. Well, technical difficulties. We are going to start still. So, providing the context regarding the development and how we rescue the information generated in these pilot projects to be translated into public policy, I would like to ask you, starting with Diego, Juan, and Carolina, how does the project of the GEF7 in Costa Rica collaborated in developing public policies, or is collaborating right now? Maybe right now they are digesting all the information to be able to tell us about what it meant for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. The project was very important from the point of view of how we're going to identify a lot of gaps that we have as a country, especially for the public sector of transport. And I had some data that are very important from how it's going to be the destruction, and we're going to be able to retake how is the most important of conversation and time of travel, availability of the public charges in these areas. As Arturo said in his presentation, that was something that was very important, that is going to allow us to, at the same time, in order to identify what were the necessities, especially of the recharging infrastructure, and some certain areas from how it's going to work these electrical vehicles, because we have trainings, and these trainings are very important because this training is going to create not only the practice but also that it's going to be available for any person that wanted to have like an electrical vehicle. In that sense, for us was very important. And on the other side, under the infrastructure of charging, we were able to see a very interesting aspect because on the national level, we're going to start a discussion, going to see how it's going to the update of the law of the public charging, but also how we're going to be able to do it in order to have that charging service that is going not only to be for the private vehicles but also for the taxis and the public and for other type of services. So for example, they're going to have like service of charging of the private cars. As for example, we're going to talk about like the private cars, what is going to be part of the institution of the type of things. So that was like a very important conversation from between different like ministries, institutions, entities in order to have like an agreement of how we're going to have a proposal of the law of this. And the project actually like end up in an analysis that is going to be much more intense, and then from the point of view that they started to identify at the beginning, especially for the infrastructure of charging, but also of the training and like operability. We have a lot of subjects that we can focus, and the project also help us out, but especially give us like some insights on where do we need to work on, when we need to start to development or continue to development, taking into account the capacity of the electrical mobility that we have in the country right now. Perfect. So basically, as you said, just summing up, it's going to show you insights where do you should start working or where you should bring more the electromobility and the electrical chargers. Very interesting. And the same question for you, Armando. Do you think that the project of GEF7 is going to collaborate in the same way in Chile as it did in Costa Rica on the public policies, or we went into another path? Armando, go ahead. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. Yes, the project and a project as this is going to help us out a lot. It's going to show us different paths to follow and also show us certain problems that we have not solved yet, but others how we can solve them. For example, something that we did know, and of course the colleagues of the other countries also knew to the electromobility or a public policy for many years with different change of governance is going to very difficult because it's going to make the loss of governance on the subject, and we knew that, and we're going to be able to see how we're going to be able to continue the governance of the project. And we have already experienced different type of governments on not only the presidency but also on the regions and the internal administration, and with that we have already tested out and we already have a path on that, and it has worked very well. And this project actually help us out in order to see how possible it is to have these type of projects, and the Ministry of Transport took these numbers and this data and modified the law of the public finance of the public services of transport, and it's going to keep also more finance, and based on that finance we're going to be able to apply it in the region of Atacama, especially in the city of Copiapó as an example, because we have 121 buses, electrical buses that we have in Copiapó, where we're going to apply this law, and it was modified based in part of what we have seen in the Ministry of Transport, but also taking into account the feedbacks of this project. And we hope that in the future we're going to be able to use it of the renewal of the taxis and the public transport of small size. And in that sense, it had helped us out a lot in public policies. And as Armando and the other people said in the presentation, when we thought about this project and when we thought in 2019, 2020, we had the necessity in order to know what we're going to do with the batteries actually. And now we had some projects that Costa Rica also showed, a couple of projects about that, and we know what to do now with that, and each country country are going to be able to see how they're going to organize the ways of these products and how we are going to create like the training and infrastructure in order to do that. And we have gone very forward with the environment ministry in the country, and we have like certain, like for example, numbers of in certain places of the recollection of the batteries of the and the reuse of the batteries. And in that sense, we have a lot of technicians from the Ministry of Energy in order to see which norms or which policies we should follow in order to create that safety process through the reuse of these batteries. And that is another advance that we have done, and it has very concrete thanks to this project. Another study that we have done with the GEF7, and we have already seen it. We have not able to be able to solve it yet, but we have it very on our table, and then we're going to see how we're going to insert that electromobility in the current electrical system, and how the electromobility is going to help us out in order to have an electrical system that is going to be much more efficient, and to see it as a whole as the users. For example, the economical system is going to work, that the whole electrical system is going to be whether it is public or private, need to be more efficient, and we're not going to be able to do it right now, but we continue to work on that. And against your question, if it had helped us out with the public policies, yes. I have more example. If you give me more time, I can give you many, but we're working on that. We have been working with certain that are very concrete, that have been solved, and we have had good results, and another ones that we have not solved yet, but we do have like a clear path, and we continue to collect information about certain subjects, especially on the region, and how we're going to apply the electromobility, because they have the goal of 2030 of the UN, and we are missing to push how is going to be the high and trucks and the big trucks on the highways, and how we're going to have these charges of 1 megabytes and all of that. That is something that we still have pending, and we were not going to be able to see it yet. We have not been able to see it yet, though. We do have a lot of people that we need to train in order to know how we can do that better, and we need to have more information about how we're going to transport trucks, and how we're going to do the electromobility to other type of transport, for example, of boats on like bigger different type of marine transports. We do have a lot of challenges, but this project is going to help us out in order to strain our knowledge, strain the path that we have already taken in the past, and to know which path we shouldn't take, and we should not continue through that line. So, as I said before, to sum up, our public policies has been based in many studies, in many pilots, and of course, the ones that GEF give us to us, it already helped us out to give you more insight. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is perfect. So basically, and listen to both of you, had helped to reinforce certain convictions, certain beliefs, and also help us in order to create more institutional like muscle in order to create more work for it. And now I'm going to speak about more to the future, and with the vision of a future. We have already spoken what was the meaning and what was the result of the GEF right now, but let's put now into the future. For example, in the future, we're going to be able to have like a new round of pilot projects in Costa Rica, Chile, with the goal that are going to be able to monitor and generate data in order to create new public policies. I don't know, Carolina, if you want to speak, because you already said that the pilot of the GEF of Costa Rica, they give us like the path where you should go through, but I don't know now, how do you see it for the future? Do you need more data, more monitoring in order to feedback those convictions, those beliefs, those public policies that we have heard before? Go ahead, Carolina, again, tell us. Where do you think that the path is going for the future, and what will be the next pilot, and what's the data that we needed to have from it? Thank you very much. In our case, a very important part that I talked about at the beginning, it was the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure sector, and the monitoring of data and information is passing through to identify what are the necessities of those requirements in our country, especially in infrastructure like the public spaces, physical spaces, and we have a network that is pretty big for the charging area of the country, but we continue to work on that, especially for other type of vehicles, not only the light vehicle that we told it, like small size vehicle, that the one that are going to be used in taxis, but we need to think about other type of vehicles in order to help them out on that area. And then we have a very important discussion, a very interesting that we have it on a national level for situations that we have seen in the implementation of everything that it is electromobility in other countries. And it has to be the type of chargers. We have a very generalized discussion right now and very heat that we have to create a standard what is going to be the adapter, how this adapter should be used, and what will be the technical norm that is going to be used in order to apply this adapter in different area, so the adapter is not going to create any complications, and also for the extension information that is going to be very relevant for the process of planification that are going to be done before, and the growth of the infrastructure of the charging infrastructure. And then later, one other of the big challenges that we have had in the country is that in Costa Rica, we have a studying that is very different. We generally they started in a high penetration of the public sector, but in Costa Rica we decided to start with a high introduction on the private sector. And right now the challenge, even though we have 2 pilots and we do have already 2 pilots for public transport, we still are very behind on public transport on that, and especially on the norm of that is going to allow us to have the change of like technological change that is going to help in order to go towards that electrical and the technological change. And in other sense that from our point of view, that it has been very important from point of view analysis, and especially how we're going to monitor public policies, that it has to do that we need to do a relationship between everything that it is the planning of the transport against the creation of energy, especially in the Costa Rican case. We have planned expanding how much electricity we're going to have and the growth of the electrical transmission, but generally we have seen it that is very like separated for the planning of the transport. And now that we have public transport that it is electrical, we need to take that into account, and now we are in discussions, in a national discussion in a national city, in order to align these 2 processes, because for us everything that is the growth of electrical growth, that it has to be hand by hand with the administration of the finance, especially because the matrix of electricity that we have is practically like 90% that is renewable energies. So it's going to create a necessity in order to see how we are going to be able to planify these 2 processes at the same time of transport, but it's going to how we are going to create renewable electrical energy, and we're not going to like deviate from that path. And it goes from analysis that is going to have an intervention in different sectors, but on that too, we do have a relationship that is very interested with the regulator entity of the public services that recently we have seen that have just generated something internally that is going to create a structure in order to include the analysis of quality of the public transport, of the charging of electrical vehicle inside of the whole framework that they have, in order to do quality of an analysis of the qualities of the services that have been done in the public sector. And in that sense, we need to see not only the quality of the charges itself, but the quality of the electricity too, that is going to be arriving into that charger, in the electrical infrastructure that is going to arrive to that charger, in order to be able to give that service. And that is associated not only with the creation of the politics, but also how much energy do we have, and the public norms and the policies that we're going to have on that creation of energy in that sense. And of course, everything that has to do with national plan of decarbonation and national plan of electricity. And we have a lot of things that are associated with electrification and everything that we have done in the public transport and electrical mobility. But we do need to create an alignment with the national plan of transport, and from the point of view of the energetic area, and how we're going to create this renewable energy in the country that is not going to go far away from that. And I think in an area we're in a level as a country of a very like specific discussion, especially with the national planning. And from now on the effect of Costa Rica, the electrification is not only seen from a point of view of electrical mobility, but also the electrification of other uses in the industrial area. But also the other projects that has been very different, and that planning has to be done with that vision of electrification in a big measure in the country. So more than pilots, we think more about processes that has to be more strategic for the country. And from that point of view, especially because we go through these very interesting discussions that is implementation of the chargers with higher range, and that has been like a very big discussion how much funds we're going to be able to manage it from the infrastructure of recharging infrastructure of the national electrical system, how to install it, where to install it, and all of that. And thinking also that we do need in order to push this electrification in the public sector and the public transport sector. And in that sense, we are right now with the bus company that they are already buying electrical buses. And I think that it's very different from the other countries because we just now starting with the buses and we didn't have them before. And with that, we started with the discussion of like electrical planning because we're going to the evaluation of the whole national electrical system and with electrification of the public sector. And that is going to be able to have to work hand in hand in order to planning the two processes at the same time, or the two sectors has to get into an agreement like energy and transport. And right now, in the past, they didn't have anything together and they didn't think about anything that it should be done together. And for us, it's something that is very relevant and that is something that we have started to discuss in the national level and that we need to start to work on that.
Well, I can see that there are several lines in which we can develop a lot of information and see a lot of needs. So I saw that sometimes Diego was connecting with us. Diego, are you there? No, Diego? Diego, okay. So taking this chance for the last few minutes that we have, I learned that you have your own opinions. Well, I wanted to use this chance to ask your opinion regarding the GEF7 project of Ecuador. If, in your opinion, it's generating valuable information for the development of public policies in terms of electromobility in Ecuador, and if maybe the data that Alexandra was presenting, the monitoring, the information could be used for the development of public policies. Go on, Diego. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry. I would like to apologize. It's at last minute, there was an impasse, and that's why I didn't even have the background that I was requested to use, but I'm so sorry. It's a technical issue. So the value behind what we were able to present indubitably creates that as a ministry, we are in these spaces sharing and giving information in terms of all these projects. Now, to comment from here from the ministry, from what we've been working on, obviously, I would say that these pilot projects that we have been generating and creating, it's exactly what helps us or make viable for all the discussions surrounding e-mobility to create a more concrete evidence, measurable evidence, and logically to be able to use in practice so it can be applicable. And in the first instance, we were doing it in the historical center of Quito, a pilot plan to create operational data that may be more close to reality, not just in the framework of what we suppose would be. So, in the terms of autonomy, maintenance, behavior of these in urban conditions, but also understanding that the topography of the city of Quito, it's really difficult. There's a lot of traffic as well, which is also a strong point. And logically considering as well all of these restrictions on the area, and in some way, it helped a lot for transport, or the driver keeps breaking these barriers that exist, maybe political barriers as well, that we as a ministry we care a lot about. It's this perception of the high risk in terms of technology and financial situation of the drivers, and this information we use it to create more precise instruments and tools that makes us available to structure in a way these forms and maps to create incentives to the regulation of fleets in both the commercial area and also financing models. We had this idea of creating a funding model that is like a loan, close to a loan, which we consider that could diminish this uncertainty created in the drivers. Additionally, we also implemented a system of monitoring, which has allowed to really understand and quantify what the benefits are both in environment and operational, maybe acoustic contamination, that it is reduced quite a lot. And also the efficiency, the logistic efficiency of last mile vehicles, that's also very important. These data can be fed or are being fed from the design of policies. And for example, in the zone of zero emissions that are aligned with international initiatives. And this also allows for commitments, and commitments that are far more specific in terms of progressive resolution and regulation, and stop being in this general area or gray area. And it may sound redundant, but these pilot projects are very useful, have motivated to push this idea to turn them in regulatory labs. What do I mean with this? For instance, the use of contract work for trucks, for electric vehicles, it has allowed for us to really evaluate alternative models of access to technology. And in such a way, we have opened the door for public policy to boost this operational link system, which are shared fleets or another specific incentives for business models that are conceived in a more sustainable way. In short, in summary, all of these projects are not only creating brute data, but also, as I did mention before, it diminishes this uncertainty, and it validates all of these operational models, and it creates conditions for us as a ministry be able to move forward in initial incentives towards policies that are more structured and more access regulation, urban planification, maybe something related with low carbon emission. And I really do consider, this is a very personal opinion, without these pilots, policy would still be based in projections. And I think they have provided so much more information for us to build over a strong foundation. Perfect. That's actually something very interesting on the way you keep providing information for these projects in the 3 countries that we've been talking with. And I want to give you an issue, and also limited by the time. You only have 15 seconds to answer, sorry. So Armando, where do you think that the next pilot project for Chile in this case should happen, for the specific mission to be to create data, monitoring data to feed public policy? So Armando, you? Thank you, Diego, and I get to say goodbye as well because I have another meeting. We have to take charging data, because the planification of electric system needs to be joined. And we see that electromobility goes way faster than the planification of the electric system. So those who want to install a charging center for trucks, for buses, for instance, may be able to do it by a requirement in, say, 12 months if they make the choice of buying buses. But for the electric system to arrive in 12 months with the networks, with the energy generation, transmission, and distribution, these issues with the networks is not built in such a way. And these issues have been used and have happened in other areas. So we would have to see and check how we bring information for the future needs so the electric system can be following those issues and resolving them with time. Thank you, Armando, for your time. What's your vision, Diego? In only 15 seconds, that's a challenge. What do you think that the next pilot project that creates data would be necessary to feed public policies in sustainable mobility in Ecuador? Well, really quickly, with what I've said, there's a lot of important information generated, and we have a very strong proposal to work with as a urban public transport company in the city of Cuenca. They have introduced their business model, and we are hoping to work with them. We hope that by the end of this year, we get to use this idea and start working with them. If I'm not mistaken, I think the fleet is at least 50 units. And the important thing here, and that I really put emphasis on, is that in the area of urban transport, this company per se has go way over the area of being afraid, of being scared of innovation and using a more sustainable transportation mode. So for us, that it's quite motivating to keep looking for ways and mechanisms for incentives so that this pilot project, as I mentioned, is able to be seen and shown this year so we can create data and keep using and making this idea a reality. Perfect. I do thank you to all three of you, Diego, Carolina, Armando, for this very interesting discussion panel. And I wish we could have had much more time to keep going, but later on we can meet up and keep discussing. So now to close up, I would like to invite Luis Felipe Kirama from the Sustainable Mobility Unit that provides the closing words for this webinar. Thank you, Juan Diego, and I think I have time to thank you in only 15 seconds as well. So initially, I would like to thank you to all the panelists, all the speakers, Arturo from the Crusa Foundation, to Jennifer from the Sustainable Energetics Agency, also Alexandra, and everyone who presented. And the last three panelists, Armando, Carolina, and Diego. And of course, the words I'd like to highlight after saying thank you is collaboration. I think this webinar is the fruit of collaboration between all of these small projects that internally or nationally, they had a lot of collaboration between different institutions, and that led us to these relevant results that we're showing today. And also a huge collaboration between working networks in which we are elaborating this type of spaces between this CMS, PNUMA, and also the Access Project and the SoMoS LAC practice community. And I think that in that area of collaboration, of adding resources to different projects and starting from that to develop new results, that provides us with the possibility to access results such as pilot projects, training. There's material that allows us to see how we are involving the gender sector in transport with concrete examples. So the invitation today is to keep collaborating in these spaces of national projects, local projects, and also invite you, all of these countries, for that creation of projects so that in areas of sector of electromobility or sustainable mobility, for different windows of funding, we from PNUMA and access, we are more than willing to support you in this process. And to close, and just to really validate everything said by the teams, everything we shared today from the speakers and the panel as well, and the video will be shared with you. I have nothing more to say other than thank you for joining us, for connecting with us, and also I hope to see you in another learning event. Have a great day. Thank you, Felipe. Goodbye, everybody, and thank you for participating.